You are listening to Lighthearted, the official podcast of the United States Lighthouse Society. My name is Jeremy D'Entremont. Welcome. Today is September 21st, 2025, and this is episode 326 of Lighthearted. With me today are three friends, and our subject is very near and dear to me. The subject is Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouse in Newcastle, New Hampshire, a location that's been part of my life for nearly 40 years. And certainly a location that we've talked about in this podcast before, but never really featured it, as the main topic in a podcast episode. So let me introduce my guests. Michelle Jewell Shaw is familiar to our listeners as a frequent co-host of this podcast, and she is chairperson of Friends of Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouses, which is a chapter of the American Lighthouse Foundation. Also with me is Bob Zimman, who is the vice chair of Friends of Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouses. And I should mention both Bob and Michelle have been honored with the Len Hadley Volunteerism Award, which honors the group's standout volunteer each year. Also with me is Bob Trapani Jr., who has taken part in quite a few episodes of this podcast as an interviewee and as an interviewer and as co-host several times. Bob is the executive director of the American Lighthouse Foundation, the parent organization of the Friends of Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouses. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for doing this today.
Hello, everyone.
Jeremy. So let me start, as I often do in the podcast, just start with a little bit about the three of you. Let's start with Michelle. Michelle, regular listeners know that you're a special ed teacher in a middle school, and we're actually recording this on August 13th. People won't be hearing it until September, but as we speak, I know you're gearing up for another school year, so you're busy with that. But you've also been involved with Portsmouth Harbor Light for a number of years now. So how did you get involved?
Just from my love of lighthouses, I attended a fundraiser that FPHL was doing at the Old Salt in Hampton back in 2017, I believe it was. And I spoke with you and Cindy Johnson and asked if I could volunteer. And I started that following season and never looks back.
Yeah. I want to do a shout out to our friend Cindy Johnson, who was co-host of this podcast many times and has been a long-time volunteer for Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouses, Friends of Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouses. She's out of town at the moment and not taking part in this discussion, but still very much part of the organization. So Bob Z, and let me just say, we have two Bobs, obviously. So from now on, I'll refer to, if I'm speaking to one of you in particular, I'll say Bob Z or Bob T. And also from now on, for Friends of Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouses, let's just say FPHL. That's a lot easier. FPHL. And for the American Lighthouse Foundation, ALF. Okay, so basically some verbal shorthand. So Bob Z, you started volunteering, I think it was more than 10 years ago now, I think?
It's 10 years. What happened was that shortly after my wife and I retired, and we took a cross-country road trip, and my wife was bugging me that I needed to find something as a hobby because she was not going to raise another kid. We have 4 children, and she said that's enough. And we were out in California, and we went by and drove by actually Pigeon Point Lighthouse. And looked at it, and at some point, after going back and forth by it a few times, we stopped in, and I decided this was something that I could get involved with as a hobby. And when we got back to Portsmouth, I contacted, I don't remember whether it was you or Cindy, somebody from FPHL, and I came down, and we were just getting ready to have a work day for getting ready to open the lighthouse, and I've been an active volunteer ever since.
Yes, you have. You got right into the swing of things then, for sure. So Bob T, you've been executive director of ALF, is it 20 years now? You've hit 20 years, right?
20 years, yeah.
Yeah, congratulations. That's quite a milestone.
Wow, that's great.
Seems like yesterday. Yeah, absolutely seems like yesterday that you started.
Except for my gray hair.
Yeah, well, I haven't changed a bit. Everybody else has gotten older, but you and I knew each other for several years before that. So it was very exciting when you moved up to New England for all of us. So ALF had the license to care for Portsmouth Harbor Light starting in 2000, the year 2000. And so you became involved with it kind of in the early years of our chapter. So I'm just wondering if you have any memories of those early days of working with our chapter and that kind of thing.
Oh, I do. I think I loved being part of some of the work teams over the years. I
Hmm.
remember fondly helping repaint the stairs on the interior of the lighthouse,
Yep.
which is always one of my favorite things to do is work from heights. But no, I've marveled at the consistency of FPHL's volunteers and how this chapter has just continued to press forward, and even in the face of the challenges that we have right now, the resolve is still there, and I love that. And listening to Bob and Michelle say how they got involved, I mean, that's fascinating for me because you never know as our interactions at a lighthouse. You never know who you're touching and how you might inspire them. And even if it's a year from now, maybe somebody gets involved. So it's important. So I love that. So thanks for taking the time to do that.
Yeah, no, I agree with that last thing you said, and I think we'd all agree. You never know who you might be talking to, so we're always trying to spread the lighthouse gospel, basically. And again, you might be talking to an audience you don't think is necessarily interested in lighthouses, but it might spark something.
That's right.
So yeah, every conversation is important. I remember, Bob, when you helped paint the stairs, you were the one who went up on a 30-foot ladder in the going up through the spiral stairs and painting the undersides of the stairs up to the top. So you were the brave one that day for sure.
I want to do it again.
Yeah. Well, it might not be too far off. So we'll put that on the back burner for the moment, but maybe we'll be doing that. So let's just quickly talk about a little history. If you don't mind, I will do that, but I'll try to make it as brief as I can, kind of the Cliff's Notes version of the history of the lighthouse. So the lighthouse that's there now was built in 1878. It's the third lighthouse tower on the location. The first one was built in 1771, which made it the first lighthouse north of Boston in the American colonies. We still have a keeper's house that was built in 1872. It was a family light station. A single keeper lived there in the keeper's house with his family. The longest serving keeper was Joshua Card. It was there 1874 to 1909, 35 years. He was 86 when he retired. And the last keeper was Elson Small, who retired in 1948. His wife Connie wrote the book The Lighthouse Keeper's Wife when she was 85 years old, and she lived to be 103. I was lucky enough to know her and interview her in her last years. So before we move on, I'm just wondering if any of you would like to comment on any of the history I just talked about, including the keepers or anything else, or any other history I didn't mention that kind of stands out for you.
I have to say, Connie Small's book, The Lighthouse Keeper's Wife, that's in my top 5 of all-time favorite books. I have read it probably 3 times. It's just such a great book. And I loved talking about Connie and things like that when we would do tours at the lighthouse, and telling people about her and, all of her special qualities that she shared with visitors at the lighthouse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was such a positive person, and she had her challenges in life like we all do, but her book just overall has a theme of hope and perseverance, and she was just a great person to know. So if people haven't read The Lighthouse Keeper's Wife, you got to find it. And we, as an organization, co-published the latest edition of that with the University of Maine Press. So if you can't find it elsewhere, please contact us, and we'll send you a copy. You might have to pay a little bit for it, but we will send you a copy. But it's one of the greatest lighthouse books ever.
You know what I think is cool too, Jeremy, with that, with
Mhm.
Connie, she often talked about being in the lanterns at sundown and the lens, and to know that the fourth order lens is still inside Portsmouth Harbor Light. And so that connection to somebody like Connie, but to its long-standing history, that people can, once we are able to resume tours, to be able to go up there and still connect with something like that, a crown jewel
Yeah.
in our lighthouse history. So.
Yeah. And she talked about, as you said, she specifically mentions the fact that she and Elson had electricity for the first time at Portsmouth Harbor, and it felt weird to push a button to make the light come on instead of having a finicky oil lamp. They had to deal with kerosene lamp. She said it was nothing to just push a button. They weren't putting themselves into it anymore. It was kind of the decline of the personal aspect of lighthouse keeping, really.
One of the things that you didn't mention at all is the the second lighthouse between the original one and the current one. And one of the things that I find most interesting is the reaction of how they built it taller than and then when they built Whaleback Lighthouse, they decided that it was too tall, so they had to chop it down and take.
Yeah.
And I just every time I look at the picture of it after it was cut down, I kind of chuckle. And it's an interesting story that you build it tall so it can be seen, and then it's too tall. But it takes more than 10 years for them after they've decided that it's too tall to actually take action on it and get it cut down.
It reminds me of a pepper shaker that when they cut the top off, it always reminded me when I see those pictures of a pepper shaker.
Yeah, it was really unusual looking. But what they did to lower it like that is similar to Portland Headlight, which was raised and lowered, I think, like 3 times in its history. And I think they would lower it and people would complain, and they'd raise it up and then cut it down again and people would complain. And so it's kind of strange. But anyway. That picture always gets a laugh, the picture of the truncated tower. So I don't want to do too much talking here, but I just want to go over a little bit of my personal relationship with Portsmouth Harbor Light, which goes back to the 80s. I first got into lighthouses in a big way in the 80s, especially the late 80s. My wife Charlotte and I lived in the Boston area at the time. We used to drive up the Maine coast a lot. We liked to stop in Portsmouth. We loved it. And one time on one of those trips, we decided to see the lighthouse. So we parked at Great Island Common, the park in Newcastle, down the street from the lighthouse. It was low tide, and we were able to walk all the way from Great Island Common to the lighthouse on the Coast Guard station. We haven't actually mentioned yet that it's on Coast Guard Station, Portsmouth Harbor. So we walked all the way to the lighthouse, got onto the base. The lighthouse was rusty. The concrete top of the base was all like crumbling, and there were weeds growing up all over it. It didn't look too good. But that was my first experience of Portsmouth Harbor Light. I'm going to say that was about 1988 or 9. Jumping ahead to 2001, as I said, the ALF had just gotten the license to care for the lighthouse. We moved to Portsmouth in 01. And a local chapter was really needed to kind of take on the project. So I helped start that chapter at that time in 2001. We started giving tours. And by a few years later, we were doing weekly open houses every Sunday afternoon from like late May to mid-October. So let's talk about the tours. Michelle, you first. What did you enjoy about giving tours at the lighthouse?
My favorite part was just meeting people from literally all over the world coming and having them learn a piece of the history about the lighthouse and the questions, the little kids, the excitement with the little kids, when they got to go up to the lantern room and things like that. Just making the public aware of the rich, beautiful history of Portsmouth Harbor Light and Whaleback.
As Michelle said, meeting the people from all over and being able to convey the knowledge and the affection that I have for Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouse and lighthouses in general to people who, especially the young people who come, who really know very little about it in most cases. And it's great to be able to see them and explain to them what's going on and hopefully have them understand and be something that they'll be interested in for a long time.
Yeah. Now, Bob T., you were being a couple hours north, and for people who don't know, the American Lighthouse Foundation is the headquarters is the Owl's Head Lighthouse in Midcoast, Maine. So you didn't come down often for our tours, but you did occasionally and for work projects also. So I'm wondering if you have any impressions from those Sunday afternoon open houses, the ones you saw.
Oh, absolutely. I think the biggest impression, of course, I love to see the people there, the lines and the smiles, but really what struck me was the organization of FPHL's volunteers and having them at, well, I'll call it a station at each location, whether it's in the tower, at the base of the tower, at the gate, and just watching this really, well-oiled machine, so to speak, work so well. Because, I mean, this is not just open the door to a lighthouse, as you noted earlier, on a Coast Guard station. There's a lot of complexities that go in, a lot of crowd control, and you didn't miss a beat with that, and just also the information that was conveyed. It was always fascinating to see not just people knew their stuff, but they were happy to share it. So I think that struck me.
Mm-hmm. We'd like to have at least 5 volunteers on hand. Sometimes we operated with fewer, but we have various stations for people. So we made altogether it was like a half-hour guided tour that people got, and it was pretty well oiled there for some years. It ran pretty smoothly, and we got as many as I think our record was 334 during a 4-hour open house. That's a lot of people to get through in that much time, but for the most part, we got a lot of great comments. People enjoyed it. So Bob, Z, and Michelle. Any particular moments, incidents, things during open houses that stand out for you looking back?
I don't. I think it's not a particular moment, but a few times when there have been like the tall ships going by, and the people there, and being able to witness that and really get a good look at the ships when they're sailing. It's that was always a fun thing.
There was this little boy. I think he was 7 or 8 years old.
Mm-hmm.
This was a few years ago when we were doing the scheduled private tours, and it was a Friday evening, and he came with his dad, and just to see the excitement in him and the questions he asked, and the dad had mentioned that he had seen pictures of Portsmouth Harbor Light online and just was obsessed with the lighthouse. So to just see someone so young, so excited about being at the lighthouse and learning about it and climbing the stairs, and he wanted to buy all the books that we had in the gift shop and things like that. That was just, and I think he was most excited that he got a sticker that had the lighthouse on it that said I climbed Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouse. So I think that was probably one of my favorite moments at the lighthouse.
I think I might remember that kid.
Yeah.
Very familiar, yeah. And Bob, Z, when you talk about the boats passing by, I remember one time a submarine, a Navy submarine on the way to the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard came by. We didn't know it was going to come. They don't announce a schedule for that, but it was on its way past the lighthouse, and the crew was all up on the top as they do when they're coming into a port like that. And we had little American flags we had in our storage shed for 4th of July decoration. So we ran and got those and handed them out to people who happened to be there at the time, and everybody's waving the little flags for the submarine going by. That was a pretty cool moment. But anytime a tall ship or anything like that went by, it was very exciting. It's a narrow channel there, and the giant tankers and container ships, they come very close to the lighthouse. That's exciting too.
I remember, Jeremy, it's of course the family aspect of these lighthouse tours, and mom and dad being able to enjoy, and some of the older children being able to climb the lighthouse. But some of the youngsters who couldn't, I remember watching intently how they just would take some of the coloring pages that FPHL would provide, and how much fun they were having doing that, and seeing the smiles on mom and dad's face as they're watching their children do something like that. So it really brought it full circle that you could tour this lighthouse, and there was something for everybody there to be able to have fun.
Our longtime volunteer William Marshall created those coloring sheets, which we got a lot of mileage out of for sure. And Michelle, you mentioned something we hadn't mentioned before, but after many years of doing the Sunday afternoon open houses, COVID happened, so we missed a year completely with that. And then we resumed, but because things had kind of changed on the Coast Guard station and everything, we went to doing tours by reservation. We were doing them on Friday evenings and Sunday afternoons. So we did it with fewer volunteers. You and I did most of those tours, one or both of us. And groups of only up to, what was it, 16 we had at one time? Or no, it was 8. It was 8. I'm thinking
10.
Something. 10.
It was 10. Yeah.
That was
it
close.
Was 10.
Yeah, it was 10 at a time.
Sometimes we could squeeze like 12 people in there.
Yeah. That went well. I thought it was nice. We didn't get as many people through, but we got people who were really interested.
I really loved the private tours, the scheduled private tours, because we could spend so much more time with the visitors, which was nice. So that part I really liked. I felt like, sometimes with the open houses, you feel like you're a little bit rushed because you're trying to get all these people through here and things like that. But with the scheduled private tours, we really were able to take our time and, just get to know the people that we were touring as well. So.
And the Friday sunset tours were really nice because we would be there.
Amazing.
We'd be leaving right when the sun set. We'd see the sunset and then leave. So people got the thrill of seeing the sunset from the top of the lighthouse, which was pretty neat. And I'll never forget. Well, we would see a bald eagle land on the rock sometimes during those tours. That was neat. But also the time I think you were with me
The
that night.
cormorant, when the cormorant,
Yeah,
yeah,
we had a group out on the deck of the top of the lighthouse, and a woman said she was afraid of birds, right?
yes,
And right then, a cormorant, which are large birds, seabirds, landed right in front of her on the railing, and I think she thought it was going to attack her or something. But that
yeah,
it was
yeah,
very strange. I've never seen a cormorant before or since do anything like that. So that was pretty memorable.
that was. We've hosted quite a few weddings, in the time that I've been at the lighthouse. And those are great.
Yeah. Yeah. We've had them going way back. I remember there's a couple of things stand out for me about that. One time in the middle of July, we had a wedding. They actually did it out on the deck at the top, and it was like a sweltering, hot, humid day in July. And the minister was elderly and watched with a cane, and he was determined to get out through that little trap door onto the deck, and he
Yeah.
did it. I was really afraid for him, but he did it okay. Another time, the bride's brother who attended was 6'10", and I didn't think he was going to be able to go through that little tiny door, and he did. But his knees were above the railing outside the lighthouse. I made me a little nervous, but he was
Oh my
okay.
gosh.
Anyway, let's move along here. And this is a subject, I don't want to get too deeply into it. I know that not everybody thinks this is a great subject to talk about, but I have to say, Portsmouth Harbor Light is one of many lighthouses that have ghost stories. It's extremely common. If you dig into any lighthouse, you're probably going to find a ghost story in there somewhere. So, and it's been featured on Ghost Hunters and other things on TV and so forth. Bob Z and/or Michelle, have you had any personal experiences along that line?
I have not. I have done when we used to do the tours in the evening, the haunted tours.
Mm-hmm.
But I can say that I have not had any experiences like that.
Yeah. Okay.
I have one. I mean, I'm not sure what to make of it, obviously, but we were getting ready for tours one
Mm-hmm.
afternoon, and Bob was actually going to be up in the lantern room. So I was in the watch room waiting for, Bob to come up, and I heard footsteps coming up the steps. So I just assumed it was Bob, but nobody came. And then I looked, I could still hear the footsteps, but I looked, but nobody was coming up the stairs. And it was
Mm-hmm.
probably 10 minutes later that Bob came, made it up to the
Yeah.
lantern room. So that was a little bizarre, but
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're not the only one who's heard things like that. I'll mention our late friend and one of our best volunteers, Ed Stevenson, who passed away just last year, was up in the lantern room one day when they had the trap door that goes up into the lantern closed, and he was actually, I think, had one foot on it, and there was like a bang bang, like somebody trying to get up and through it, and he looked and nobody was there. Our volunteer Sharon was below, and she said, "Oh, I thought that was you that did that." So
oh
that's one of the
yes.
odd things that's happened, and I'm one of many people who's heard a voice in there. All I heard was "hello," but I know what I heard, and there was no obvious source of that. That's for sure.
Yep.
So, but we'll end that there. Again, I don't necessarily want it to be known as the haunted lighthouse, but it's part of the fabric of the place for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about the fact we've mentioned it before that it's on a Coast Guard station. Bob T, you are involved in the management of several lighthouses under ALF. How is it different dealing with a lighthouse that's on a Coast Guard station?
It's another world. It's not just that we're partnering in a sense on the same site. They are a military organization. Sometimes there's heightened security, there's sensitivity, and everything. There's layers. I guess that's the best way I can describe. There's a lot more layers with everything we do at that site than you would generally have at another site, even one that's offshore. You might be subject to weather and your boat. But if weather and the boat are fine, you're generally okay. But at the station, you just never know. There's always a wild card in play. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It's got its pluses and minuses for sure. Kind of adds a layer of complexity, but the Coast Guard's great. We love the Coast Guard. Michelle, you had something to add about the Coast Guard?
I actually do. A few years ago, our audiovisual club at the middle school that I work at in Rochester, they always do a Veterans Day video, and they wanted to do something at the Coast Guard station, do some video, and then be at the lighthouse as well. So I, spoke with the Coast Guard, and I brought the teacher from that group. And I think there were 4 or 5 students that came as well. And the Coast Guard gave them such a wonderful tour. They let them, get on the boats and see all the different things that are on the boats and toured them all around the station. And then I took them over to the lighthouse and, gave them a tour of the lighthouse. But that was a really great day. The Coast Guard was so great in accommodating with those students so they could get some good video footage.
Well, that's really nice. They do also in the past. I don't think it's been happening recently because, well, at least the lighthouse hasn't been involved. But University of New Hampshire brings groups of kids to the station to see the research facility that the university has on the site there. But also during a lot of those visits, the kids have been given a tour by the Coast Guard of the station.
Yeah.
So they are good about that kind of thing.
Well, there are some positives too with being on a Coast Guard station. A lot of lighthouses can occasionally suffer vandalism. That's rarely going to happen at Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouse, maybe never because of its location. I think too, just having eyes and ears on the lighthouse, like during the storms of 2024, being able to communicate what's happening, even if we can't stop it. And then I think lastly, during public tours, of course, the Coast Guard has an 8-decade plus relationship with lighthouses. So there is that special connection that people can readily connect to. So for all its complexities, great partners. And at the same time, it's a lot of pluses too.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Definitely.
So let's jump to the very recent past. There was a big storm on December 23rd, 2022. I remember my personal experience of that. I had a foot operation the day before, so I'm lying on the couch at home with my foot elevated, kind of in my bed, my couch of misery. And I know there's this tremendous storm raging, and I get a text from our friend Justin at the Coast Guard station, the personnel there. And he sent me a little video clip that he took during the storm. And the camera the phone kind of jerked around a bit, so it was a little hard to see. But I saw the lighthouse for a couple of seconds, and it looked like there's something wrong here. And it really wasn't immediate that we knew what had happened. But Michelle and Bob, I think you actually went there. It was the next day, wasn't it?
The next day.
Yeah. And what did you find that day?
The walkway was just gone.
Yeah.
There were a little bit, like when you first stepped up onto the walkway, those, that little section was still there. I think there's a lot of pictures. There's a picture of me standing at the end looking down over the edge. I was afraid to get too close because I wasn't sure if the rest was going to go or whatnot. But that was seeing those videos during the storm and things like that. That was crazy.
Just in case people don't know, there was I measured it once, 84-foot wooden walkway, or the most recently it was rebuilt with Trex, the recycled material, the part you walked on, a walkway that provided access from an opening in the old wall of Fort Constitution over to the base of the lighthouse, and that over rocks. And sometimes at high tides, it's just water almost up to the walkway or over it in the case of this storm. But anyway, so as you say, that walkway was gone. Bob T, anything to add about that?
I remember going down and seeing that after the December storm, and I did manage to get myself over the side and down to the ledge, which I thought at first was going to be like, oh, that's no problem. I mean, you don't realize the elevation there, which wasn't a lot, but when you're ready to disembark that end, that twisted end, and you're going to go like, oh my gosh, it gives you pause. But anyway, I was able to get down, and then just looking back from the base of the lighthouse and then just thinking, my goodness, I mean, just in a few hours, look, the whole feel, the historical aspect of the station, the access, everything is just altered that quickly. Yep. And then, of course, and I know you'll get into it, we've seen more later.
Yes. Yeah, we'll get into that in a second. But it changed not having the walkway there changes the appearance so much. You see old photographs, postcards. The walkway is a very iconic part of that scene there.
Yeah.
So it definitely looks like something's wrong at this point without that walkway or footbridge there.
And when you see the photos, I remember there was one photo that we used to use during the tour that showed a previous time when the walkway was washed away back in 1978, I think it was. from the big storm we had in '78, and it looked eerily similar.
Yeah, that's the only other time I know of in its history where some of that walkway was washed away. The blizzard of '78, February '78, and one of the great pictures we have of Joshua Card, keeper for 35 years. He's standing on the walkway with his dog. I just love that picture.
Yeah.
So that's one of the historic pictures where it really stands out. So jumping ahead to January of last year, you were starting to allude to that, Bob T. We had back-to-back storms, January 10th and 13th, along with king tides, like historic high tides. I think it was the all-time high tide in Portland, Maine during those storms. The storms did a tremendous amount of damage all the way up the Maine coast, including a lot of light stations. Michelle, did you actually go there to the station during that first storm on January 10th?
Yes, I did actually. I was in the area to get some photographs of, the waves and things like that during the storm.
Yeah.
And Justin from the Coast Guard called me to tell me that there was some damage to the base. And I happened to be right around the corner at Great Island Common. So I went
Yeah.
over to the lighthouse. I went over to the station, and it was just the rocks that were up, and the storm had started to move out a little bit. The rain, it had stopped raining, but
Yeah.
the tide was still pretty high. There was still water, crashing up over that seawall that was damaged on the Coast Guard station. So to see the devastation that had happened to the base of the lighthouse from that storm was just, I remember standing there and I just started crying, seeing the damage. And then there was more damage. It just was getting worse with the storm that happened a couple of days later.
Yeah, I went between the storms, and as I remember it, I wasn't allowed to go near the lighthouse because there were so many rocks all over the ground. The whole area near the keeper's house and everything was badly flooded, and rocks everywhere. So they had it blocked off. So all I could do was look at the lighthouse from a distance. I couldn't really see any damage or anything because I couldn't get close.
Yeah.
But then the second storm happened on the 13th, which I think was actually a little bit worse than the first one. And maybe Bob T, could you describe the damage that was sustained in those storms?
Yeah, I can. I'll begin by saying on the 13th, I was at Portland Head and Bug Light during the storm. And of course, the waves were impressive at Portland Head. But when I went to Bug Light, what struck me there was how high the water was. You could really get a feel for it there because it was places where it should not be. Basically,
Yeah.
the breakwater was underwater. So after seeing, I think I was at Portsmouth Harbor like just a couple days after those storms, and of course the base of the lighthouse was severely damaged. But I think when I looked over at the oil house, that's when I realized just how high that water was, the damage to the brickwork right up to the slate roof,
Yeah.
and how that oil house did not collapse upon itself. I don't know, but that will give you pause because it was at that point you realize these structures have no place to hide, and they were just taking the full brunt of that storm. And it's like, okay, that's now. If this continues like this, this is going to be a problem for these buildings, these structures that are situated, as like I said, in harm's way.
What has been done since then to address the damage sustained in those storms?
Well, the biggest thing we could do at this point, well, there was a couple things that actually we attempted to go through the FEMA process for Friends of Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouses, but because it was Coast Guard owned property, that ended up being a non-starter for the site. So it was left to us to be able to actually carry out stabilization and its emergency work. And with approval from the Coast Guard who owns the site, we were able to carry out much needed emergency stabilization to both the base of the tower and the oil house. Because as everyone knows on this call, the subsequent high tides that came after, days later, even weeks after, were continuing to scour underneath the base of the tower now that the base itself was severely damaged, actually pretty much gone on that south side. So we had a couple different problems. It wasn't just the base, wasn't just the oil house. It's now, oh my goodness, we've got the base of this lighthouse, and we don't even know how this lighthouse is actually affixed to the ledge itself, which was not very
Right.
evident, still isn't very evident on how that's. as we know, Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouse was not built to be a wave-swept lighthouse. So it's like,
Yeah, it's a
so
really unusual case. Yeah,
yeah.
it's a lighthouse meant to be on solid land that's actually extremely close to the water. Even in normal conditions, it's pretty close to the water. Even in a normal, really high tide, not in a storm, the water would come up to the top of the base, basically.
So, I mean, to be able to actually watch, it took a while, and it was like pulling teeth at times to get us to that point where we could say each structure was stabilized, but we did it. And I think that just, is a testament to the perseverance of FPHL and ALF with this. And now the big work's still ahead. But
Yeah.
I mean, for the moment, we did as much as we could do
hmm
in the emergency situation.
So the base is not considered a full restoration, right? There's a bit more work that should be done to consider the base totally restored. Is that correct?
That's correct. I think the most critical element that still needs to be returned there are the heavy, large timbers that surround the base of the tower. And that, for those listeners who, if you can visualize this at all, basically it's like a cap of concrete on top and onto the old, Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong, but 1804
That's
base.
correct. Yeah, the rubble stone base from 1804. Yeah.
Yeah, so the that concrete cap is not fully compatible with its base, and to protect it, in 1998, the Coast Guard placed these heavy timbers around the octagonal base. It worked wonderful until they gave way in these big storms, but that element needs to be returned, and I will sleep a whole lot better when it is.
Yeah. I think there were 8 of those, right? And there are 3 left, I think, at this point.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So hopefully we'll get that shored up completely in the not too distant future. So going back to the walkway or footbridge, or whatever you want to call it, we kind of use those words interchangeably, hasn't been rebuilt yet, but a major fundraising campaign has been launched for that. So Bob T, again, can you explain what needs to be done with the walkway?
Well, the walkway right now, we can rebuild the walkway exactly the way it was, but I think we've seen from the last couple years that we want to add a measure of resiliency to this walkway if we can, build it better, build it smarter, and basically be able to elevate the walkway if we can get a professional design that will go through the Section 106 consultation review process and be approved by both the State Historic Preservation Office and the U.S. Coast Guard. But if that can happen, it's exciting to think about the fact that these storms, as destructive as they have been, we're going to be able to rise above those challenges to the best of our ability and resume one day in the not too distant future our normal operations there. But to do so, we just have to do things just a slight bit different to really accommodate our new normal.
As I said, we've started a fundraising campaign. And Michelle, maybe you'd like to say something about who is involved in that fundraising and how it's gone so far. And this is pretty recent, only goes back several weeks, really, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it started, we applied for a grant through the New England Lighthouse Lovers organization back in May, might have been May. So we got a $5,000 grant from them, which was wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And then just recently partnered with Lighthouse Credit Union. They are going to be our corporate sponsor, if you will. And they have helped us to kick off a capital campaign to raise, the needed funds, $100,000 to get the work done that we need to get done at the lighthouse and, get it back open to the public.
Yeah.
We had our first event of the campaign last Thursday. We had a small picnic at the lighthouse where we were able to welcome some people. I shouldn't say we were at the lighthouse. We were at the picnic area.
Pretty close to the lighthouse, a
Yeah,
few
so
hundred
we
feet
could
away.
still see the lighthouse from there. But that was a really successful event. And, people kept asking that night, are you guys going to do another event soon? And, we're hoping to have another bigger event this winter when more people can come. So, but I'm excited about this partnership with Lighthouse Credit Union. We've got some t-shirts for sale that are on our website, and beginning Friday, they'll also be on sale at the Chamber of Commerce in Portsmouth at the Visitor Center.
Mm-hmm.
So the t-shirts are great. They say "Save Our Lighthouses," and on the back there's our logo with the two lighthouses on there. So I think this
Yeah.
is going to be an exciting time for our organization. And I think we're really gaining some momentum here in this effort.
I think so too. We got another, I'm going to say, at least for now, anonymous $10,000 donation on the night of the picnic as well. So
Yes.
since we officially started the fundraising campaign, we've basically raised about $24,000. Maybe it's a little more than that, but at least about that. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's pretty good for just launching it pretty recently. So we're hopeful, and tell me if you don't agree with this, but we were saying we'd like to have it done in time to have a tour season in 2027. But if we can keep it going and raise the money fast enough, maybe get the walkway rebuilt in the spring and maybe salvage at least part of the 2026 tour season.
Yeah.
That seem possible?
That would be great.
Keep our fingers crossed. That's kind of what we're hoping for.
Yes.
So, Bob Z, you were at the picnic last week also. Anything you want to add about that event?
Well, I think it was great to have the picnic. One of the things that really made me feel good is there were a lot of people there who I did not recognize.
Yeah.
So I think we did a pretty good job of getting the word out to get people who we don't regularly see to come and participate. In addition to the picnic, we also had the silent auction, which I think was very well appreciated, and certainly people bid on the items, and number of the bids were for more than the retail value of the item. So it was really quite nice opportunity for people.
It was a great evening. Yeah, we raised with the silent auction and everything. We raised about $3,000 plus we got that $10,000 donation. So it was a good evening. Well, you mentioned hopefully we'll do another at least one fundraising event in the next few months before next tour season. But so people should watch for announcements. And I should mention that our website is portsmouthharborlighthouse.org. Any new events will be on there, portsmouthharborlighthouse.org. So just a couple of final questions, and this is for any or all three of you, whoever wants to take them, in any order you want to take them. The last two questions, which of course are for bonus points. We all know that the last questions on this podcast are always for bonus points. So what do you think Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouse means to this region, the New Hampshire Seacoast region?
I think that to this region, Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouse means a lot of different things. I think people see it as obviously a big piece of history in this area. There's been a lighthouse there for more than 250 years, but also just a thing of beauty and strength and community. It just brings people together. That's what I think people see when they look at Portsmouth Harbor Light.
I think Michelle said it very well. It's probably very much along the lines of what I was said. It's part of the community. Just the fact that we have, the Lighthouse Credit Union, who's decided to sponsor us, gives voice to the idea that the lighthouse is important to the community.
I see it as timeless. I see it as continuity. I see it as, of course, tradition. It tells us where we've been. We enjoy it in the present, and it's a part of where we want to go in the future. And I think most importantly, when everybody looks at Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouse, if it doesn't bring a smile to their face, they're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
So I think it means that much to people.
Well, I can't improve on what the three of you just said, but I'll also, like so many lighthouses, it's very iconic just visually, and it's used all over the place in advertising and, the local newspapers and TV station, WMUR, they use it in their opening, visuals on the news and so forth. So it's just so visible, and tourists going in and out of Portsmouth on the tour boats, Portsmouth Harbor Cruises and the Isles of Shoals Steamship Company and so forth, they pass it constantly all summer. So absolutely countless numbers of tourists see it and probably wonder about its history and so forth. So it's a very, very visible part. It's probably the icon of the New Hampshire Seacoast region.
Yeah.
I agree with everything that was said about the Lighthouse Credit Union as well. I think, to me, I see their support as inspiring. The Friends of Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouses are the friend to this lighthouse, so to speak, but the lighthouse also needs other friends, and here the Lighthouse Credit Union stepped up at a time when we need it most, and is really just assumed a leadership position within this community and for this community project. So, hats off to them for helping us in the way they are doing.
And it's pretty cool. They approached us. We didn't approach them.
Right.
Just kind of out of the blue, they reached out to us, which, obviously we love the name Lighthouse Credit Union, so it's a really nice fit. It was called Northeast Credit Union. They changed the name, I think it was last year. So, but it's a beautiful fit, and they've been really great so far to work with. So final question for bonus points, okay? And then again, this is for whoever wants to answer it. What is your favorite thing about your involvement with Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouse?
My favorite thing was getting to see particularly the children, particularly those who came for the visits when they were going to the Marine Research Lab and everything. And I've missed having those opportunities to interact with the kids. They were mostly 5th through 8th grade kids for the most part, and they were interested. And I don't know if it was because they were going to have a test on it later when they got back to school or what, but it was always wonderful to see them because of their interest and their excitement. And of course, always the primary thing was to be able to get up to the lantern room to take a look and see what they could see.
I think my favorite part is the friendships and connections that I've made over the last 7 years, since I've been, or 6 years, however long it's been, long lasting lifetime friendships that I've formed now, like the three of you, Cindy, all of our other volunteers and CLC members. It's just, we're a big family, and I just love that.
Yes, my favorite thing is the ability to have us all make new lighthouse history at Portsmouth Harbor, to make a difference, and in the end, do what the lighthouse keepers have always done, and that is help keep the light shining.
We're all a part of the lighthouse's, new history now. Like in 100 years, they'll look back and see the people that have been caring for this lighthouse as, we're not official keepers, but in a sense, we are the keepers of these lights, and we're a part of their history now.
Yeah. Well, history is being written every day, as you all know. And sometimes I think of a keeper like Joshua Card, who, that was his baby. He must have loved that place so much. He was there 35 years until he was 86 years old, oldest keeper in the country. And I think, it's Joshua's lighthouse, or it's the lighthouse of the keepers of the past, and we're just the modern day stewards. In a sense, we are the modern day keepers, but I wouldn't want to take that title from Joshua Card.
No, definitely not.
He was the keeper, but anyways, quite a legacy.
Captain Card.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Bob T, Bob Z, and Michelle, for being part of this special episode about a place that, means so much to all of us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a lot of fun doing this episode. I hope many of our listeners will be able to come for a tour sometime at Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouse, hopefully in the not-too-distant future. We will be back with a Lighthearted Light episode next week, and then a brand new episode the week after that. As always, to all our regular listeners and our new ones, thank you so much for listening, and keep a good light.
Shine.